So why don't we start with some meditation, and we'll meditate for about 35 minutes. Then we'll take a short break, and then I'll offer a talk, and we'll have some time at the end for questions and discussion. So I invite you to listen to your body and just see, what does your body want to do in this moment to feel more comfortable. So much of our lives these days can disconnect us from our body. And sometimes just taking a few moments to listen and move and let the body stretch or breathe can feel nourishing and settling. And in your own time, letting your body come to stillness in a comfortable, upright posture. So we're finding that balance of a sense of ease and relaxation with some alertness and vitality. So a quality of dignity and presence in the spine. The eyes can be closed or just gazing down at the ground, whatever feels more comfortable for you. I often like to take a few deep breaths, just feeling the settling on the out breath, even extending the out breath a little bit. So if you breathe in through your nose, filling the lungs completely, and then exhaling through the mouth slowly in a thin stream of air, just feeling any relaxation or settling, however small. And perhaps beginning by doing nothing. So just being present, seeing if it's possible to disengage from the habit of doing meditation, doing chores and tasks, shifting into this mode of being, kind of a receptive mode. You might feel the body, you might notice sounds or thoughts. You might be aware of a different mood or emotion that's present for you this evening or today, depending on what time it is where you are. And as you invite this sense of just being, you might notice if there's any tension or tightness anywhere in your body that could be softened or relaxed just by bringing your attention there. So you might notice your forehead, your eyes and eyebrows, the rest of your face and jaw. And see if you can let all the muscles in your face be totally open, just soft and relaxed. Sensing your neck and throat. Can there be any releasing or easing there? Down into your shoulders, your arms, upper arms, lower arms. Letting your wrists, your hands and fingers be relaxed. And taking a few moments in your own time to just scan through the rest of your body, front and backs of your torso. side body, the pelvis, legs, all the way down. Down into your feet. Just becoming aware of the whole body sitting. Its warmth, its weight. And you might notice the places where your body touches the ground. So the chair or cushion beneath you, your knees or feet resting on the floor. In particular, see if you can notice the firmness, a sense of solidity of the ground. There's something we can rest on. What would it be like to give your weight to the earth a little bit more? And just allow all of the muscles and tissues in your body to register that there is this firm, solid support beneath you, receiving your body. So with meditations, particularly important how we meditate, the particular qualities or attitude we bring to it. One of the analogies that I find very helpful is to think about meditating like you're spending time with a friend. So if you like, I just invite you for a few moments to consider, what if a really good friend of yours were here with you? An old friend, kind friend. And you might picture that person. You might have a sense of what it's like to be with them. And if you are joining me in this experiment, just taking a few moments to really remember, feel, or sense what it's like to be with this good friend. And in particular, how you pay attention to each other. As if you hadn't seen each other for a long time. And what are the qualities that are present in your heart and in your mind as you see this friend, as they see you, as you listen to each other? We're not in a hurry. We put everything else down. We give our friend our full attention. We're probably patient, interested, loving. Understanding. And so I invite you to see if you can notice your own heart and mind's capacity for this quality of loving interest, a caring, patient, and receptive kind of attention. A certain strong and tender openness that says, "How are you? Just tell me all about it." That's ready and available to receive whatever comes. And as you tune into this way of paying attention more and more, you can slowly begin to let the sense of your friend fade and just begin to bring that kind, interested attention to your own experience, maybe to your breath or your body, or perhaps just to the experience of hearing sounds come and go. So you might lightly rest your attention with an anchor, like the breath, your body, or sound, and treat that anchor like your old friend, just listening, spending time. Or in this insight meditation, sometimes if there's some steadiness in the mind, we might allow the attention to be more open, just receiving whatever experience happens to be unfolding from moment to moment. Different sensations, sounds, thoughts, or emotions. Just being present with each moment of experience as it occurs. Trying to stay balanced, present, interested, and caring. So let's practice together this way silently. I'll offer a reminder or two from time to time. It's natural for the mind to wander, to lose track of what we're doing, what's happening in the moment. The practice is one of learning to just gently let go and then allowing your attention to naturally return. In the moment of waking up, it's already here, you're already aware. And we can appreciate that we've remembered. It's like welcoming ourselves back. Just like if your mind drifted in the conversation with that friend, you wouldn't spend any time worrying about it. You just come right back to being with your friend. Thank you. It's lovely to sit together. So why don't we take a 5-minute break just to stretch, get some water, get the blood moving, and we'll come back at 10 after for a talk. As we begin the formal talk for our evening together, I want to start by respectfully acknowledging the land here where I am in the San Francisco Bay Area and the tribes and First Nation people that have lived on and stewarded this land for many, many generations, the Chochenyo Ohlone, where I am, and the coastal Miwok to the north. I also want to name the ongoing violence here in the United States against the Asian community, police violence against the Black community, the recent death of Dwante Wright, the intensity of the trial that's happening in Minnesota of Derek Chauvin, in the killing of George Floyd, the traffic stop of Lieutenant Nazario in Windsor, Virginia. There's just been so much happening here in the United States with so much intensity. I know that I've been feeling it a lot. And I'll be honest and share there's a part of me that just wants to stay quiet right now, you know, and just kind of be with my heart and all that I'm feeling around it. My hope is that the talk tonight, although it's not directly related to those issues, maybe can speak a little bit to some of the places where we can get hung up in Buddhist meditation and Buddhist practice around this question of how we relate to the world and to other people, and the tendency to misunderstand the teachings. That's I would call it a misunderstanding, that they encourage us to somehow disconnect from what's happening. So as many of you know, I've been studying the Dharma and walking this path for a couple of decades, and also training and studying and practicing another modality called nonviolent communication for nearly as long. And a lot of my work kind of bridges the two. And I found that each kind of has its own sort of gem or wisdom to offer and support the other, and to kind of complement or fill in areas that might not be as clear or developed. And at first glance, they can appear to be in conflict. It can seem that particularly the work of a communication practice that's focused on deepening relationships and connections and connecting with our feelings and attending to and meeting needs in our life and other people's lives is somehow in conflict with the Dharma, which is rooted in letting go and non-attachment. And then we have this complexity around the teachings of the Dharma around letting go, non-attachment, non-clinging, and the more modern Western psychological concept of healthy attachment. So this is the terrain that I want to explore tonight, and share some thoughts and reflections that I've had and been developing for many years, putting together from my own teachers, my practice, things I've read, and hope that it has some support or meaning to you, that it comes across clearly. So this whole path of the Dharma that the Buddha discovered is about freedom from suffering. It's really about releasing our hearts and minds from the unnecessary ways that we struggle in life, and ultimately fulfilling our potential as human beings. My experience both as a student and practitioner and as a teacher has been that there's a misunderstanding at the core of the teachings that can lead to a kind of disconnection from other people, from life, and perhaps most tragically from ourselves, from our own hearts. So I want to talk a little bit about what that misunderstanding is, and then how we can understand it in a different way. So at the core and the sort of foundation of the Buddhist world and all of the Buddhist traditions around the country and the different lineages and schools is the Four Noble Truths. It's one of the things that's shared universally by all traditions and schools and sects of Buddhism. Now, unfortunately, the way that this gets translated is one of the factors that leads to some of this misunderstanding. So oftentimes we hear the first noble truth as life is suffering. And then the second noble truth, desire is the cause of suffering. And then there's an end to that suffering and a way, a path leading to the end of suffering. And then we hear teachings that everything is impermanent, everything is dukkha, this word that gets translated as suffering, and everything is anatta, not self, impersonal. So that can be pretty bleak. It's like, wow, life suffering, everything's impermanent suffering, not impersonal. It leads to this kind of sense of like, well, get me out of here. You know, I should detach from everything. And the teachings can become this kind of perceptual overlay that we place on life, like the teachings on anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unreliability, the kind of unsatisfying nature of things because they are changing and unreliable, and the empty, impersonal nature of things becomes this interpretation that we view everything through, that then starts to disconnect us from life. So rather than using them as a way of stepping back and reflecting and contemplating our experience and investigating it, seeding wisdom and shifting how we relate to life, we begin to disconnect based on an idea. For example, we see a beautiful flower, and if we're really, really sincere and dedicated Dharma practitioners, maybe we think that our very first thought should be, it's impermanent. Don't get attached. So we immediately cut ourselves off from the beauty of the flower, and we don't actually appreciate it because we are adding a thought and an interpretation that was just going to die anyway. One of my first meditation teachers, man by the name of Anagarika Munindraji, who some of you probably have heard of. There's a wonderful book about him called Living This Life Fully by Mirka Nasser. He played a very important role in the transmission of the Dharma to the West. He was Joseph Goldstein's first teacher, one of Sharon Salzberg's first teachers, and had a huge influence on the founding generation of teachers in the insight meditation world. Apparently, back in the late 60s, when many Westerners had first gone to India and Asia to practice and were studying with Munindraji at the Burmese Vihara in Bodh Gaya, one of them asked him, they said, Munindraji, why do you practice meditation? So Munindraji was kind of a relatively short in stature Indian man with, he wore white robes. He was an anagarika, semi-renunciate, shaved head, and just like tons of energy and vitality. His eyes, even when I knew him in his 80s, his eyes were so bright. He would get so excited about things. And he said, apparently I wasn't there, his response was, I practice meditation so that when I'm walking to town, I don't miss the little purple flowers by the side of the road. So clearly this path isn't about cutting ourselves off from the beauty of the world. Here's this meditation master saying, you know, like, I practice meditation so I don't miss the joy and the vitality and the beauty of the world. There's another way of putting that. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master, poet, peace activist, who is still with us, though he's nearing the end of his life. Many believe. This is from a retreat that I sat with him in August of 1999 in Vermont. He said, "If you know that things are impermanent, that the person you love today may die tomorrow or leave you tomorrow, then you come to the conclusion that what you can do to make her happy today, you have to do it today. What you can do to make him or them happy today, you should do it today. Tomorrow may be too late. If the insight of impermanence is alive in us, we will not make this mistake. Our way of looking at him or her or them, our way of smiling to them, our little gestures every day will be filled with love, understanding, and compassion. And that can make them happy today. And if tomorrow something happens to them or to you, you will not regret. This is the wisdom transmitted by the Buddha. And that wisdom is based on your insight into impermanence." So this is a very important point and starts to speak to this, this area that I'm wanting to explore together today of our relationship to life, our relationships to each other, our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to what's happening in the world, to the environment, to other species, to our communities. Here's another teacher saying, hey, when we're aware of impermanence, it doesn't lead to less connection. It leads to more connection. It leads to deeper connection, fuller connection, a richer sense of appreciation and fulfillment in life. So this whole path is about happiness. It's about freedom. I was just teaching a retreat with my friend and colleague, Jessica Mori. I love the way she put this. She said, you know, the Four Noble Truths is great news. It's some of the best news yet. Like, so let's go back to that and look at another way of translating it, a more accurate translation of the first noble truth, as many of you are aware of, is not that life is suffering, but there is suffering. There is this part of life that's hard, that's difficult, that's painful. What a relief to just acknowledge it, to not need to hide it, to be real about it with each other. Not only that, but there's a cause to that struggle, to that hardship, to that pain. It comes into being. It's not permanent. It arises due to certain conditions, and then it ceases. It can actually stop. And not only that, it's not random. There's a way to bring about its cessation. So this is like really good news. That the difficulty, the pain, the anguish, the hardship, the struggle, the stress, the strain that we experience isn't random. It follows certain laws, and we can understand those laws and use them to our advantage to actually begin to reduce, minimize, and eventually release the suffering that we add to life. So this second truth, the cause of suffering, it arises due to a certain condition, often translated as desire. So again, many of you who have studied know the word is tanha, which is a very particular kind of desire. Tanha and upadana. So tanha means thirst or craving. It's a very particular energy. It's a reflexive, unconscious movement for something to fill us up. Think about what it's like when you're thirsty. It's not in our control, right? That's the word the Buddha used to describe the cause of our suffering. This thirst, this hunger for more, for something else, to be something, to get something, to become something, to feel something, to get away from something, to get rid of something, to make it stop. you familiar with that, those energies in yourself? So tanha and upadana. Upadana means attachment or grasping. So this is the word that gets translated as attachment, upadana. And it's a particular kind of contraction. Sharon Salzberg, I really like the way she translates it. She translates upadana as control. And for me, it really captures the essence of the energetic quality behind this force in our hearts, control. So a certain confusion arises due to the translation using the same word attachment as we have in Western psychology and attachment theory. So anytime you hear the word attachment in Buddhist teachings, replace it with the word control or grasping or fixation. It's that quality that's being referred to that drives and entangles us in suffering. So there are three things to discuss here. One is, what is healthy attachment in the psychological sense? What's being referred to there? Second, what role does that play in the spiritual path, particularly this path of the Dharma? And then last, how do we understand the teachings, particularly the teachings on letting go, in relation to healthy attachment? So I want to just give a very brief kind of overview or summary of some of the key features of attachment theory. For those of you who are therapists, this will be review, and you probably know more about it than I do. And for those who aren't, it might be interesting. So attachment theory was kind of postulated first by a man named John Bowlby, and he defined healthy attachment as a lasting psychological connectedness between human beings. I think today we would go on to add a kind of emotional bond, an emotional closeness and psychological connectedness between human beings. So it's the ability to engage and maintain that sense of a bond. And the understanding, the theory is that that capacity to engage in healthy relationships, to maintain healthy connections and relationships, depends in large part on a template that's formed in early childhood with our parents or our primary caregivers. And so in what's known as a secure, healthy attachment, this experience of a lasting emotional and psychological bond or connection, the parental figure provides certain experiences and qualities to the child. Dan Brown, who's a meditation teacher in the Tibetan tradition and also a psychologist who's done fascinating work on healing attachment disorders, he points to 4 or 5 key qualities that the parental figure provides for the child to develop this healthy attachment. And the key here is that they don't have to be perfect, but just good enough. So one is a certain balance of safety on the one hand and protection without being overbearing. So there's a sense that the child feels safe, protected. The parent is there, watching, tracking the child, but the child also has space to explore. The second is an attunement to the child, to their development, to their emotions, to their overall internal state. And this includes things like empathy, mirroring, validating the emotions they feel. So there's an awareness that the child has a distinct inner life. There's a valuing of that inner life and an attunement to it that the child can experience. There's a sense the child has internally, there's someone out there who sees my internal world and affirms it. Then when the child is in distress, the parent or parental figure is able to comfort and soothe the child. And we know today that the human nervous system needs that external support to regulate as it's developing. Fourth, the parental figure expresses joy in relation to the child. Not just in relation to what the child does, not just their actions or accomplishments, but in the child's being. Celebrating the child in and of themselves, who they are. And that leads to a sense of healthy esteem. That who I am is loved and wanted and celebrated just for who I am, not because I'm a good boy or a good girl, not because I do the things my parents like exclusively, but just by being, I'm accepted and loved and celebrated. And last, there's a willingness to support and encourage the child's self-expression and development in the world, supporting them to discover their own identity, to walk their own path rather than having an agenda or a narrow idea of who they should be. And I want to acknowledge this can be difficult to hear if we're hearing this for the first time. There's a range of experiences that can come up. For some of us, listening to this and thinking back to our childhood, it can be painful to say, wow, I wish I would have had that. It can be validating to say, no wonder, wow, it makes so much sense. For those who are parents, it can also feel quite vulnerable or painful to hear like, oh gosh, I do this, but I don't do that, or I really see, these ways that I could have done something different. So I just want to make space for acknowledging the tenderness and sensitivity of talking about those formative years and the importance and impact of those connections and relationships. So the good news is twofold. So one, when we have enough of those qualities present, the result is what's called developing a secure internal base. There's a sense of being okay inside. And from that sense that I'm okay, who I am is okay, what I feel is okay, how I am is okay, and I can take care of myself. From that, we are able to enter into relationships of closeness, to sustain the difficulty and pain when those relationships end or change, and to handle the challenges and shifts in life that are inevitable. The other piece of good news is that when those early formative experiences are lacking to some degree, or if we have lived with a legacy of pain and loss, that those gaps or those places where we weren't met in the way that would have been the most healthy and healing can be repaired later in life through relationship, through a surrogate relationship, whether it's with a therapist, a counselor, an intimate partner, a spiritual teacher or friend, or even the healing powers of relational meditations like loving kindness practice or self-compassion. So for those of us who didn't get the full range of mirroring and empathy and encouragement and support and attunement that the ideal parent figure would have offered, don't worry, we're not doomed, right? We can actually heal and repair those injuries. And meditation has a very powerful and fascinating role in that. These healing meditations that we can do that begin to address the places in the heart where there might be a lack or a wound, as well as through relationship, as I mentioned. So this is what's meant by healthy attachment. It's not about being needy or clingy. It's not about getting fixated or trying to control things. It's about developing as a human being and having a sense of wholeness and balance in our relational life. the ability to enter relationships, to shift as they change, and fundamentally a sense of security within, that I'm okay. So what role does this play on the path? I want to share with you a quote from a paper that was published in 1995 by Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary on the need to belong. My friend and colleague Matthew Brensilver, who's a clinical social worker, shared this quote with me. Many of you know Matthew, his beloved teacher. So this is from their paper, which has been cited over 25,000 times, apparently. It seems fair to conclude that human beings are fundamentally and pervasively motivated by a need to belong, and seem to need frequent, affectively pleasant or positive interactions with the same individuals. And they need these interactions to occur in a framework of long-term, stable care and concern. If psychology has erred with regard to the need to belong, the error has been to underappreciate it. The desire for interpersonal attachment may well be one of the most far-reaching constructs available to understand human nature. So from a Western psychological perspective, this need that we have to feel connected, to experience a bond and belong, is essential. If we look at the Buddhist teachings, we see this reflected in many, many ways present. Before going there, I want to, actually, so no, I'll get to that other piece later. So there are many references to this need for connection and the power of belonging in the teachings. So first and foremost, we look at just the cultural and historical context of ancient India versus modern capitalist Western society today. So 2,600 years ago, India was a kind of structured in sort of like these feudal clans and tribes. Communities were much more connected. The family bonds were intact. So you have a whole society where the individual is embedded within a network of relationships with a deep sense of place and belonging, membership in a family and a tribe or clan. The Buddha was from he's known as Shakyamuni Buddha because he was from the clan or the tribe of the Shakyas. So it's important to account for the differences in the cultural context today versus ancient India and recognize that we live in this hyper individualized society where the basic unit of the nuclear family is sort of like disconnected and floating in many parts of Western society. Not exclusively, there are webs of connection intact in different communities, whether you look at like, say, the Orthodox Jewish community in my lineage, or many Latino communities or African American communities can be much more close-knit. Families with large extended family units. So there are still areas where that sense of being embedded in a community, in a family, are present. But by and large, the sense of isolation, alienation, disconnection is rampant. So from the very beginning, the sense of healthy attachment, I would argue, was a given in the ancient Indian context. Then we go and look at, how did the Buddha teach? What did he share with his with people who would come to him and say, I want to learn? So does anyone know what the first thing is that the Buddha would teach to lay people when they came to him? You just put it in the chat. Tracy's saying gratitude. close. It's a part of it, not explicitly. Anyone else? Yeah, generosity. Exactly, Marcus. Joanne, you too. The first thing he would teach people before meditation, even before ethics, even before sila, he would encourage people to give. He would say, go out and give. Share. Not because I told you to, just as an experiment. Give and share when you want to and see what it feels like. So what happens when you give someone a gift? What happens in the heart and in the relationship when you share something? If you share some of your food with someone, we create a connection. Now we have a relationship. We begin to develop a bond. And through that relationship, through that connection, we start to see and recognize our own self-worth, our own self-esteem. There's one of those aspects of healthy attachment. Right? So from the very beginning, the Buddha was pointing people towards their sense of place, belonging, relationship, and the value of being aware of others. And through that, it's brilliant. What do we realize? What do we start to see? That it feels good to let go, right? To give, we have to let go of something. We begin to experience the joy of letting go. And then from there, the Buddha went on to teach ethics, virtuous living, not causing harm, again, about relationship, how we affect one another. And the list goes on. So you look at the emphasis the Buddha placed on kalyanamitta, spiritual friends, the importance of having wise companions on the path, to the point where the Buddha said, if you don't have a wise companion on the path, rely on me as your friend. I will be your friend, even when I'm gone. The example of my life can be your friend. So this sense of friendship and connection at the heart of the path. And many of you are familiar with that famous story with the Buddha's cousin and attendant Ananda says to him, it seems like friendship and friendship with the wise and admirable is half of this whole path and spiritual life. And the Buddha says, don't say don't say that, Ananda. It's the whole of the holy life. It's the whole of this path, friendship with the admirable. I'll say more about that in a minute. Or even looking at the triple gem, the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, right there again is that sense of relationship, belonging, connection, community. So I would argue that healthy attachment in the Western psychological sense of belonging, feeling connected and bonded with others is central to this whole path. It's a given, and where it's not a given, the Buddha is actually encouraging us to develop it through dana, through sila, through sangha. So why is this important? Why is it there? Why is it helpful on the path? From my understanding and experience, we need that sense of belonging, of connection and safety to start to open up to the difficult truths of impermanence, of the unreliable nature of life, of the selfless impersonal nature of experience. Those are difficult things to witness, to experience, the truth of groundlessness, of suffering, of impermanence. We need a certain amount of ground inside, a certain kind of strength and security to even begin to turn towards and open to the inconstancy and uncertainty of life. So let me give you a couple of examples of this in ways that I think each of us experience in our own life. You've been out all day. Let's say it's COVID too. So you've got your mask on, you're trying to stay away from people. Maybe you're shopping in the store and not everyone's wearing a mask and not everyone's keeping 6 feet and you're in traffic and you know what it's like to be out there, right? And then you get home and you close your door. Right? what happens? Everything relaxes, something lets go. It's like, oh, thank God I'm home. Right there. Safety, security, letting go. Okay? Let's take another example. Ever have the experience, when I look back on my life, I see this experience happening more frequently when I was a child, but I've also had the experience as an adult. Something difficult happens, something scary, something painful, something hard, and you're okay, and you hold it together. You're like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'll be all right. And then you get home to mom, or you get home to your partner. And what happens? The floodgates open. Oh my God, I can't believe what happened today, right? Why? We feel held. Yeah. There's that bond, that connection, that sense of safety, and we can let go. We can open. Yeah. So think about what it's like to come to meditate. Have you ever tried to meditate in a place where you don't feel safe, physically, emotionally, or psychologically? What's that like? It's very difficult. We need a certain level of safety, physically and emotionally, to close our eyes and go inside. This is one of the reasons why in the last number of years, it's taken us, it's painful to recognize how long it has taken this community to recognize, but this is why there's been so much attention given to making sanghas more inclusive, to attending to things like unconscious white supremacy and racism in our sanghas. If you have light-colored skin like me and you go to a group, maybe you feel right at home closing your eyes. If you look different or you dress different or your gender is queer, maybe you don't feel as safe walking into a room of all white people, people who appear straight. So the sense of safety is essential for us to be able to start to relax, let go. And one aspect of that is through the sense of healthy attachment, of connectedness that we experience in life. So this brings us to the third area that I wanted to dig into and explore a little together, which is how do we understand the teachings on letting go in relation to healthy psychological attachment, to this lasting connectedness and bondedness. So there are two or three parts to this. One part is understanding the Buddhist perspective on experience. Another part is understanding what's meant by non-attachment. And the third part is what's meant by letting go and how that happens. So the Buddhist conception or analysis of experience is that all experience is relationship. The very nature of this life is dyadic. There's two. So there's always a sense of something being known. If you look at your mind and you look at experience, at any scale of depth or level, until there's actually not a sense of duality, there's duality. Whether it's me talking to you or me in this room, there's that sense of me in relation to, right? I, thou, I, it, as Buber put it. And we start to look more closely at consciousness. The Buddhist analysis of consciousness is that consciousness is always awareness knowing something. So there's the eye seeing an object. There's the ear sensitivity and the sound. There's the tongue sensitivity and the taste. There's the the body sensitivity and touch, tangible objects. There's the heart-mind door and knowable objects. So there's awareness, knowing, an object. It's called nama rupa in the Buddhist psychology. Nama is mind, rupa is form, or subject object is another way of translating it. So consciousness is subject object. It's something being known, something being known. Why is this important? Healthy attachment is about relationship, something coming together. So when the Buddha said to Ananda, do not say so, Ananda, spiritual friendship, kalyanamitta, is the whole of the holy life, he was also making a play on words, because kalyanamitta does not just mean spiritual friends, it also means friendship with that which is spiritual, or friendship with that which is beautiful. In other words, the Buddha was saying the quality of relationship to experience can be one of friendship, just as we explored in the meditation. What would it be like to allow that experience of consciousness, knowing objects, to be imbued with friendship? For the mind to become acquainted with the beautiful aspects of itself, patience, joy, gratitude, truthfulness, generosity. So the Buddha is pointing to, at all levels of our life, at the conceptual level of me and you in relationship, how do we bring metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha? How do we bring the Brahmaviharas to our relationships? The standard for human relationship in the Buddhist path are the Brahmaviharas: empathy, love, compassion, joy, celebration, equanimity. And down to the moment-to-moment level of the mind experiencing life, same thing: friendliness, balance, kindness. So all of life, all human experience can be understood as relationship. And the question, the investigation, and the transformation of Buddhist practice is, how is the mind relating? Are we relating from a place of ignorance, confusion, greed, and hatred? Give me what I like, get me away from what I don't like. Is the mind relating from a place of wisdom, clarity, generosity, compassion, renunciation, letting go, letting be? So what is meant by this sense of non-attachment? So there's another distinction that we can make here. This is one that I first heard from Joseph Goldstein, the difference between detachment and non-attachment. And of course, some of this is semantics, just depends on how you define the terms. But we can understand detachment as this sense of disconnecting. That's what I was talking about before with the flower. Like we see a sunflower in bloom and we say, it's impermanent, it's just going to die anyway. We're detaching, we're cutting ourselves off, versus non-attachment, which is that we're not pulling away from it, but we're also not getting obsessed with it. The relationship of the mind to the object, or at a more gross level of the sense of self to the world, is not complicated or bound with entanglement. So it's not about disconnecting from life or disconnecting from other people or sensory experience. It's about shifting the relationship to sensory experience from one of control, fixation, entanglement, over-identification, to a relationship of perspective and love. One that sees clearly the nature of things and brings the heart to bear. Again, going back to the quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, when we see impermanence, we don't take things for granted, we appreciate them. So 2 examples from the early suttas that I want to offer to illustrate this. One is what I call a direct teaching, the other is an indirect teaching. So the direct teaching is the example the Buddha gave to his disciples. It's kind of striking, actually, the resonances with what's happening in the United States and around the world with the Black Lives Matter movement today. The Buddha says, say there are two oxen, a white ox and a black ox, and they are joined at the neck by a yoke. So there's a, like harness around each neck, each of their necks, and they're kind of chained, joined together. And the Buddha asks his disciples, is the black ox a fetter to the white ox, or is the white ox a fetter to the black ox? So think about it. Do you know what they said? I can't remember actually if any of the disciples got it right or if the Buddha had to give them the answer. So the response from the Buddha is neither. It is the yoke that joins them that is the fetter. This is a very important teaching. So again, the mind knowing an object, okay? This is our life. Every moment, awareness is knowing something. So the Buddha, the white and the black ox are the mind and the object. It's nama rupa, subject object. So whether you're talking about the eye and a sound, the tongue and a taste, the body and a sensation, the heart and a feeling, the mind and a thought, okay? The Buddha's saying it's not, the problem isn't out there. It's not that that sound is so awful or that flavor is so enticing. If that were the case, we could, we would cut off our ears and close our eyes and get enlightened. And he's saying it's not that the problem is in the senses either. The problem is in the relationship between them. It's the yoke that binds them that's the issue. What's that yoke? That's upadana. That's clinging, fixation, control. It's this quality, it's this energetic quality in the heart in how we relate to the substance of life, where Dan Brown calls it grab, a certain quality of friction where we get stuck on things. We try to control them. So the Buddha's saying that's where the issue is. And that's where suffering can cease. When that grab, that control ceases, when the yoke that binds the oxen is released, they're free. Nothing changes. There's still the mind and the objects. We still experience pleasure and pain, seeing and hearing and thinking. But we're free because we're not bound by it. The Buddha had two chief disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana. They were two of the very first people to convert, to ordain, to become disciples of the Buddha, to take on his teachings. And they both became fully enlightened very quickly. And they were with him from very, very early on, all the way through his 45 years of his 45 years of his teaching. And they died, both of them died before him. It's like his two best friends. And we have a record of him addressing the assembly of monastics, monks and nuns, after Sariputta and Moggallana died. I'm going to paraphrase. I don't have the sutta in front of me. So he says, looking out, it is as if the assembly is empty. He says, it is as if a branch of a great oak tree were to have fallen off. And then he says, and still it is amazing. It is marvelous. My mind is not disturbed. My heart is not disturbed. His two best friends just died. There's clearly an experience of loss that he is speaking to, like a major branch of this great tree has fallen off and broken, and I'm looking out, and it's like, where are they? And yet that sense of peace, the equanimity is not disturbed because the mind has been freed from the entanglement, the fixation of trying to control life. This is what's meant by non-attachment. It's not detachment. It's not cutting off from life. It's not being entangled by life. It's not giving up the futile attempt to control that which can never be controlled. So what's meant by letting go? What's meant by letting go then? In many ways, I think this phrase we have in English is a misnomer. Like when you come home at the end of that day during COVID, you don't walk in the door and say, now I'm going to let go, right? You just, something lets go, right? It happens naturally. One of the analogies Menindraji used to use, and this is something he said to me, this is not secondhand, he would say, fire is hot. When you touch fire, you put it down. When you know that fire is hot, you don't have to think about it to let it go. You just put it down as soon as you touch it. So this is how liberation happens. This is how the Four Noble Truths unfold. The heart understands fire is hot. Oh, letting go happens. The heart lets go when it experiences the pain of holding on. Not right away always, but when the conditions are there, it lets go. So letting go isn't about getting rid of something. It's not about throwing anything away. It's a release that happens on its own. Another way of thinking about it is it's like putting something down. So I've been holding this little stone during the talk. It's kind of nice shape and weight and smooth. So if I want to let go of this stone, I don't have to throw it across the room. I can put it right, I can put it down. I put it down right here. And then if I need it, I can pick it back up again. So the Buddha talked about putting down what's not yours, not holding on to it. Sometimes the process of awakening is referred to as putting down the burden, laying down the burden of everything, the past, the future, needing to be someone. And that laying down of the burden is something that happens naturally as the heart understands how much energy it takes to carry the burden. It's like having a backpack with heavy stones in it and you forgot you're wearing it, and all of a sudden you go, oh my God, I'm still wearing this bag. And you take it off. This is a quote from Ajahn Buddhadasa from a book translated from the Thai by Santikaro Bhikkhu. To understand the Dhamma sufficiently is the first step, but understanding it isn't the end. We see that as the mind begins to let go, to loosen up its attachments, these attachments dissolve away. We experience this until the point where attachment is extinguished. Once attachment is extinguished, the final step is to experience that the mind is free, everything is free. So what Ajahn Buddhadasa is talking about here is a gradual progression of letting go that's referred to in the suttas of viveka, viraga, nirodha, vosaga, of stepping back, getting perspective, viveka, viraga, dispassion, not being as caught up in everything, nirodha, ceasing, letting things be, letting them end, and vosaga, giving up, relinquishment. And it's this last phase of vosaga that he's talking about. The Buddha said that at the end, we throw everything back. We give everything back. This means that we have been thieves all of our lives by appropriating the things of nature as I and mine. We've been stupid. We've suffered for it. Now we become wise and we are able to give things up. The last step of practice, we realize, oh, it isn't mine. It belongs to nature. We give everything back to nature and never again steal anything. But to do that, to have that kind of complete release, we need to feel held. We need to feel connected. We need to feel safe. We need to feel like we belong. Then we can put things down because we know we can pick them back up again when we need them. True wisdom and true freedom is about being able to put things down and pick them back up again as we need to. There's a quality of flexibility and understanding in the relationships of our life. We don't have to avoid relationships for fear of being trapped, and we don't have to cling or hold on to them for dear life, because we feel held and supported by something else deeper inside. And it's not even that I let go or you let go, because the very sense of me, the very sense of being someone is a function of that control, of that clinging. So the heart releases the sense of being someone, of needing to be someone. That contraction ceases and is released. And in order for that to happen, there needs to be a sense of feeling held enough. I think I want to end with a quote. Actually, I have two endings. Which shall I use? Let's use this one. I'll end with a quote from my teacher, Ajahn Sucitto, and then we'll shift to some questions and discussions. This is from a talk he gave at his monastery in 2004. Actually letting go requires holding. Not exactly holding on, but holding or being held. You're held with awareness, held with tenderness, held with patience, held with this beautiful firmness that's not savage or harsh, but just held carefully. And in being held carefully, tenderly, holding with clarity, something in us starts to feel that and we begin to relax. It's like coming out of a panic, as if someone were putting their hand on your shoulder when you're in some kind of panicking state, and you can just feel that steady presence. Something inside can navigate towards that steadiness, that gentleness, and then, you come out of the trance. This occurs through your nerve endings, not just as an idea. Letting go requires holding, being held. So I offer these reflections for your consideration tonight. Thank you so much for your kind attention. So as we transition here, I will share again what Irene shared earlier, which is that these teachings that I'm sharing with you are not mine. I didn't make them up. I'm passing along what I've learned. And this cycle of passing these teachings along has been lasting for over 2 millennia because of the generosity of all of us. Practicing, studying, learning, giving to our teachers. It's a great cycle. And so if you feel moved to support my practice and my teaching so that I can continue doing this, I would be deeply grateful. There's no obligation, but there's an invitation. If you'd like to offer a gift to support my teachings, you can do that. And Irene will put the link to offer a support or contribution in the chat there on my website. So we've got about 20 minutes left. We can use this time to to take some questions. So if you have a question, you can drop it in the chat, or you can raise your hand virtually on Zoom, and we can give you a mic and hear what you'd like to ask. I see there's one question in the chat already, so I'll start here. I'm thinking about how recognizing impermanence can easily trigger fear of abandonment, which is a pillar of the anxious attachment style. How can an anxious attachment person, me, embrace impermanence without that fear response, especially in partnership? So thank you for the question. The caveat here is I'm not a trained therapist. So, and this I think is moving more into that domain of, healing attachment wounds. But based on my understanding and my own life experience and practice, I would focus on deepening and developing more of a secure attachment through whether it's therapy, loving kindness, self-compassion meditation, or particular visualizations where you're visualizing like a mentor, elder, parent figure and imagining them being present, available, loving, attuned, supportive, celebratory, all of those beautiful qualities we went through, so that you start to internalize that sense of someone's there for me. I can rely on them. I'm okay. I got this. That's the sense that Ajahn Sucitto was referring to of being held, that then allows us to open to the truth of impermanence. And so that sense of being held can come from many different doorways. And I think that's where we as practitioners can have a certain amount of creativity. Some of that sense of being held comes from refuge, from taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. And that doesn't just mean like bowing and chanting the, Buddhang Saranam Gacchami, although that's helpful. It means really developing a connection and a relationship to the sense of refuge, so that you feel it. You feel a sense of being held. It's a very powerful word, saranang, refuge, safety, security. We have to experience that in order to open to impermanence and feel held. So I hope that's helpful. So a few more questions coming in here. I'll just take them as they start to come. Can you say something about any connection between grief and attachment? So again, I think one needs to define the word attachment. What are we referring to there? Are we referring to grief and healthy bonding, or grief and clinging or unhealthy attachment? There are different views on this, and I think a sort of classical view of Buddhist psychology is that grief is a result of unhealthy attachment. If you look at the first sutta of the Buddha's teachings, the dukkha, domanassa, upayasa, this whole list I'm not remembering in the moment. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair is the translation. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair is one of the descriptions of dukkha. And the Buddha's quoted as having said, all that is dear brings suffering, right? Because when we love something and then it changes, we suffer. So on the one hand, yes, you can point to that relationship and say, yeah, there's grief when we enter into a relationship and that relationship ends or changes. From a sort of more modern psychological perspective, and what I think many, certainly Western Dharma teachers, although there are probably Asian Dharma teachers who might share this view, there's a certain kind of grief that's healthy. When healthy attachment, healthy emotional and psychological bonding ends, either due to death, illness, or change, that's painful. There's an experience of loss there. And for me, what's been interesting in my life and the place that I practice with this is to see where are the differences between what we could call healthy grief, which is a certain kind of, I think, like a maturing of the heart and a metabolizing of loss, and a quality of grief that burns, where we're not letting go. The heart starts to control or fixate, and you can feel, I should speak for myself, like I can feel in myself the differences between those qualities of grief. Another question. So I hope that's helpful. Feel free to follow up if it's not, if you have more questions there. Another question here. Some of them are coming into me in private chat, so you can't see them. So I'm just responding chronologically. How do we feel held or safe when a marriage of many, many years ends? And when one has some friends, but none as close as one's former partner, and one is older and unlikely to have another partner. As we get older, developing relationships is not as possible. Meditation alone does not seem enough. Losing a partner is a great loss of joyful embodiment. Thank you. Really just receiving the tenderness of what you've written there, and just the depth of loss, and the it's like I get this sense almost of like the whole landscape shifting around you. I don't want to take away that there's something precious to me about what you're speaking to, and that experience of loss and that experience of absence, because it's like it's the other side of the beauty of the love that you experienced. I'm not hearing you asking, for it to take it away, but you're asking, how do you feel held or safe? Well, I mean, I think that's really the question for all of us, really, to ask. That's a place of practice. The nibbana, the goal of this practice, one of its awakening, enlightenment, the unconditioned, one of its synonyms is khema, which means the secure. There's something profound about that for me, the secure. In a world of instability and change, where is there true security? So any security, any safety we find is always conditional in this world. But we use it to arrive at something that's unconditioned. When I was, one of the times that I was in India practicing with Munindraji, I think I asked him, I was in my early 20s and I had a lot of questions about my life, and do I want to become a monk or have a family? And I asked him, I said, Munindraji, do you ever get lonely? His response was very interesting. He said, I am never lonely. He said, the birds are my friends, and the trees are my friends, and the clouds are my friends. I'm always surrounded by my friends. I am never lonely. But where do we find that sense of safety and being held? I think that's for each of us to explore. And, I can only point to what I know, what's worked for me. Certainly this work around attachment, healthy attachment. Someone's asking what is healthy attachment. It's a sense of connection and bonding with another human being that's not complicated by control. I'm not trying to get something from you. You're not trying to get something from me. It's free, it's open. There's love. That's certainly an aspect of it in my view. But there are many doorways to that. For some, it's through nature. For some, it's through music or art. For some, it's through service. For some, it's through silence, meditation, devotion, chanting, singing. There's something very powerful about what the Buddha said when he said, you can rely on me as a spiritual friend. There's something very deep there. It's an offer. It's an offer that echoes to us across the millennia. The Buddha saying, I'm here for you as a friend. Take that in. And your spouse, your beloved, the times that you shared together will never leave your heart. The love that you shared together will never leave your heart. That's yours. It's always here for you. So the sense of connection and safety and belonging is internal ultimately. It's not external. So it's important for each of us to find, like, where do I feel that? Where do I know that in my life? And then deepen that, really develop it, internalize it, so that it's here for you as a support. Thank you for sharing and for your question. Okay, there's a few more here. Let's see what we can do. Susan, how does one avoid attaching in the sense of grasping or controlling? Attaching to what makes us feel held. Great, great. You can't. Don't try. Don't try to avoid it. Holding on is part of learning to let go. The heart's gonna hold on. It's gonna try to control things because it doesn't know any better. Let it happen and learn from it. John Sachito uses the analogy. He says, if you're floating in the sea and all you've got is a piece of driftwood and someone comes along and says, hey, let go, be free. You're like, I'm not letting go of this, right? I'm not letting go of this until something better comes along. We need to hold on. We need to grasp onto things until we don't need to anymore. And that's what the path is for. It's slowly kind of weaning us off of our addiction to holding on to things. How? By developing something else better. Mindfulness, concentration, generosity, kindness, wisdom. Those help us to feel held. The mind is held by its parami, by its virtue, by its goodness, by its clarity. And then the heart doesn't need to hold on. Okay, another question here. I found your explanation of the oxen and the yoke very helpful. Can you explain where you see compassion playing a role in that analogy? How does compassion fit into the process of letting go? So compassion, my understanding, so compassion is one of the Brahma Viharas, one of the divine abodes, or the boundless states, the immeasurables, these qualities of the great heart, the mature heart. So the understanding in Buddhist practice is that the human heart and mind, which are not separate, are imbued with the quality of empathy. It's a resonant capacity to feel with what's happening. And that's just how we're built. So that compassion is the heart's response to suffering, the great heart's response, the open heart's response, the resourced heart's response. So when the mind meets an object, when what awareness knows is suffering, is pain, the natural response, the resonance with that suffering is compassion, which is both a quality of embracing, oh dear, and a quality of responsiveness. Hey, are you okay? Do you need something? How can I help? So compassion embraces and responds. And the understanding is it's the heart's innate and natural resonance with suffering when it's free from the entanglements of confusion, stress, self-centeredness, greed, anxiety, fear, competitiveness, all of the things that get in the way. So let's see, maybe one more here. When you spoke of healthy attachment, I feel a sense of deep sorrow at what I did not receive as a child. I feel this sense of deep grief and loss. I feel like I need to grieve what I never had before I can step into what I could be. Can you please comment? I would follow that intuition. That sounds right. Yeah. Sharon Salzberg tells a story of going to her meditation teacher, Sayadaw U Pandita, one of the other meditation masters from Myanmar, which is also experiencing tremendous suffering right now, who came here to the United States and had a huge impact on this Western insight meditation lineage, taught Joseph and Sharon and many others. And she went to him. I can't remember. I've heard her tell the story a few times. I have to check with her on the impetus for it. But she was grieving something. Something was coming up in her practice where she was crying. And U Pandita was known for being a very, very stern and difficult teacher. Very, very high standards, uncompromising. Really, really pushed his students, sleeping 4 hours a night, practicing all day. So he went to her and told her that she had this sadness coming up and she was crying. Sharon experienced a lot of loss and suffering early in her life. Her mother passed away when she was quite young. It's very difficult. And she was totally stunned by his response. He said to her, "Cry your eyes out." Sometimes we just need to cry. Thank you for your question, Tara. It's a difficult one. I don't have time to comment on it now, but my heart goes out to you, and I wish you a lot of tenderness for yourself and for the other person in your life, and a lot of equanimity, which is that sense of balance and perspective. That there's only so much we can do to help others. Doesn't mean we stop caring, but we just recognize that there are limits to what we can do. Well, this has been really, really sweet for me, everyone. Really, really lovely to spend the time together. So let's end with a moment of quiet and sharing the merit of our practice. So I just invite you to turn your attention inwards for a brief moment here. Connecting with the goodness and beauty in your own heart. The beautiful intentions that have brought us together today. And so may any insight, learning, or transformation from our time together, may it be gathered together as one and multiplied. May it be joined with all of the goodness of the three times, the past, the present, and future. And may it be shared with all beings everywhere, all those living with fear, the threat of violence, all those without safety or refuge, literal or figurative. May all beings be loved, held, and safe. May the benefits of our practice inform our lives and reach far and wide, that there be more peace, safety, and freedom from suffering on this beautiful planet. All right. Take care, everyone. I'll be teaching a couple more times this month. You can check my website to see where I'll be. And then next month, I'm teaching the Metta Retreat with Sharon Salzberg, Greg Scharf, and Winnie Nazarko at IMS. So maybe see you there, if not before then. Be well.